Hello, this is Aggregate Supply and Aggregate Demand, World Domination Edition, basically explained through the eyes of Doom and his country, the People's Republic of Doom. So, what does Doom want to do? He wants to rule the world. He wants to conquer the world because he's an evil supervillain. And right now, all he has is a country, that is the People's Republic of Doom, and his people, which are minions. He doesn't really have anything else. What does he need? He needs a strong domestic economy. That he has to have that before he can rule the world. Because if he doesn't have a strong economic domestic economy himself, then how is he going to be able to um, get the funds to take over the world? Um, the answer to that is he won't. So he has to learn how to do that. And in this case, he's learning aggregate and demand and aggregate supply. So let's move on. So, yep, that's a image of him wanting to rule the world, evil supervillain. Okay, so what is aggregate demand and aggregate supply? Well, let's look at this graph. Basically, the y-axis is the price level, and that shows how much inflation goes up or down, and then the real GDP, the x-axis, shows how employment goes left or right. So in this case, the uh, situation is perfect, right? It is right in the center on the long run aggregate supply. It's all good. And in this case, I'm demonstrating the price one and quantity one as a dollar bill and a yellow cloud explosion for some reason. So this is stagflation. What that is basically the worst case scenario. The way that happens is the aggregate supply actually shifts to the left, as you can see, which basically makes it so that not only is employment low, but inflation is high, which that is a no-no. That is very bad. This has happened to, I think, America in the 70s and England in the 70s. But that's stagflation. It's big no-no, and the only way it's a shift of the short run aggregate supply line. It's not a shift of aggregate demand. And then real growth is basically the opposite. It's aggregate supply shifting to the right. That is really good because not only is employment going up, but inflation is going down. So that's really good. Can't really think of any examples, but Doom is learning. Okay. Now this is a recession. Now what's the difference? It's not aggregate supply shifting, it is aggregate demand. And what happens is the employment is low, but the inflation is also low. So it's kind of a, you know, you win some, you lose some, you know. Inflation being low can be seen as a good thing, but generally unemployment or employment being low is not seen as a good thing. This is a boom, and it's the opposite. It's aggregate demand shifting to the right. Employment is very high, which is good, but inflation is also very high, which is not good. Um, so this is showing the production possibilities curve in relation to the aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In this case, it's a recession. We talked about this. But basically, how it relates is I've illustrated the production possibilities curve with traffic light. In this case, the recession would be where the green light is. because that's where it is. And then this is I think, yeah, this is a boom. The again, it's the aggregate demand shifting to the right, and um, in this case, its relation to the production possibilities curve is where the red light would be. That's where the dot would be for a boom.
Just adding some things. Real GDP is the value of all goods and services of a country. So in this case, for Doom and his country, he's kind of out of luck because it's just him and a bunch of minions, and he hasn't really set up an economy yet. So it's basically at zero. And then the long run aggregate supply is a straight line, vertical, that does not move. It doesn't shift. Things shift to it. So the aggregate demand, the short run aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply, they shift back to the long run aggregate supply. But it's basically the line where if the government weren't to do anything, things would shift back to it.